Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Work Well podcast. This episode is brought to you with thanks to the Fruit People. The Fruit People are leading the way in workplace nutrition, both in office and remotely. Check out thefruitpeople.ie for more. And it's thanks to the Fruit People we have a delicious fresh fruit and healthy snack pack to give away to one lucky listener to this episode. To find out how to enter, go to workwellpodcast.com and find the link to this episode. Today in the show, I'm delighted to welcome Mary McCluskey. So Mary works for Permanent TSB and is responsible for engagement, well-being, and diversity and inclusion initiatives across the bank, supporting over 2,500 colleagues who in turn look after 1 million customers. So as well as her interesting and challenging work life, Mary, as you'll hear, also has a busy home life. I was particularly interested to learn more about Mary's 4-day working week and how she's finding that in terms of her productivity, her efficiency, etc. So, personally speaking, I think these flexible working arrangements are something that we're going to see a lot more of in the future. So I think you'll really find this conversation valuable. That's enough from me for now. It's time to sit back and enjoy my chat with Mary McCluskey. So Mary, hello and welcome to the Work Well podcast.
Hello, Brian. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. I'm nearly at the end of my working week, so I'm delighted.
Fantastic. And tell us, how is life and how is work for you at the moment?
In a word, it's busy. But you know what? Life and work has always kind of been busy for me anyway, and I really wouldn't have it any other way. I suppose home life is great since working from home, since that arrangement has kicked in. I'm finding it really, really beneficial for me. Obviously, it's not the same for everyone. I'm counting myself very lucky in that regard. But yeah, it's going great.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit more about your role and how that works.
Yeah, sure. So my role is quite a long and long-winded title. It's Engagement, Wellbeing and Diversity Manager with Permanent TSB. So it's as varied as it sounds, really. I think it's the best job our HR department has to offer. Now, maybe I'm a little bit biased, if not possibly the best job in PTSB, but it gives me access to so many people across our business. Particularly with loads of employee resource groups to do with our wellbeing and diversity initiatives. So it's all very people-led, which I really love. So I suppose if I can talk you through my role and the different elements of it, if you like. That
would be great, yeah, because it's quite a mixed role. Yeah, that would be great to hear about that.
It is, yeah. So starting obviously with the first and foremost topic is wellbeing. Wellbeing, I will look after all the health and wellbeing related initiatives for Permanent TSB, and that involves a lot of work with our fantastic Wellbeing Committee. So they roll out loads of initiatives throughout the year. They are made up of a team of people who are divided into work streams of physical and mental wellbeing, as well as a spotlight team who look after kind of keeping wellbeing first and foremost, and making sure that it's front and center of people's minds. So outside of that, then I also look after various other programs like our employee assistance program, our health screening program, paid flu vaccinations. Well, really our Wellbeing Committee is kind of core and instrumental to that. And then separately, I have diversity and inclusion. And funnily enough, it does actually really link in nicely with wellbeing, because I suppose if people feel included and feel psychologically safe at work, their mental wellbeing is really benefited by that. So our diversity and inclusion program has lots to do, and it's really, really kept me busy since I started the role. We really want to set out to be more inclusive as an organisation, and we have employee resource groups set up to do that as well. So again, separate teams of people. We have 3 different groups, and we're about to set up a 4th. And then outside of that, then I suppose everything else to do with employee engagement. So things like our Every Voice Counts employee surveys, recognition awards programs, and that type of thing. So lots of different things going on in my role.
Very good. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And is it possible to give is there a time breakdown between each of those areas across your week? Does it depend what's going on really on where you're spending your time?
Yeah, it really depends on maybe particular initiatives that we're running. So, for example, if we were looking at maybe when we're doing a wellbeing week, which we do every October, and that would be all about wellbeing, and that really, really consumes my time. Diversity and inclusion, we could have various initiatives that are running, and those could be things that are relating to events, you know, things to do with maybe say our program on gender balance, maybe to do with pride, you know, to support our LGBT plus people. But then equally we could have things that are going on behind the scenes that we're trying to change processes and procedures and things like that as well. So they mightn't be necessarily very obvious to people in the organisation, but there's a lot of stuff could be going on behind the scenes. So some weeks it could be, you know, 90% D&I, some weeks it could be the opposite, and it could be all about well-being, which is exactly what I love about it.
That sounds great. All right. Yeah, the diversity of the role itself.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about so you mentioned the Wellbeing Committee there. What's what's the wellbeing structure, if you like, there at PTSB? So you've got yourself almost like in the leader role, and then there's a Wellbeing Committee as well. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so I sit within on the HR team, and I sit on our people experience team. So the people experience team looks after wellbeing, engagement, D&I, industrial relations, all that kind of employee relations type of stuff. So for me, I look after all wellbeing. We have the Wellbeing Committee, and they are all representing different areas of the business. So they represent in the geographical areas in the sense of our regionals, our branches, our head office, and various departments then as well. So every department is represented. So each of them then brings a different voice to the table, and it's great because actually everyone brings something different, and they bring different perspectives. So they're able to bring the perspective of, you know, how their roles are impacted when it comes to well-being, or how their role impacts well-being, and you know, even the geographical side of things, to make sure that we're not too Dublin centric as tends to be the case, as I'm sure you know.
I do, yeah, and that, you know, that's so important, and that's something I talk about a lot. You know, I might call them well-being champions or well-being advocates, but you know, having the kind of, I guess, shared ownership, if you like, of well-being. So it's not just one person or one team that owns well-being within an organization. That, as you've mentioned, the different locations, departments, they each have a voice, and they can kind of feed into the process and feel that ownership. I mean, if you're, as you said, if you have a big initiative to develop, I don't know, a gym in the head office in Dublin, that's not much use to your Cork colleagues, for example. So having that voice, having that feedback is so important.
Yeah, and interestingly, actually, in some ways, COVID has done us a favour in that regard, because, and I'm as guilty as this as anybody, but we did tend to organise a lot of events and things that were very much head office based. And obviously, while maybe some other local offices within Dublin, people may have been able to attend, that's no good to somebody in Mayo or Donegal or any other locations. And we were starting to try being more inclusive in that respect, in that, you know, we'd heard about this new thing called Zoom, which was, you know, so new to us a year ago, and we were going to try and get people involved and to Zoom into to the talks in the room. Still, it was still putting people a little bit in the back foot, and they were very much on the periphery. So it's kind of leveled the playing field a little bit. In fact, obviously, COVID has been horrendous, but it has offered us some really good benefits in that respect, in that I think that won't change for us going forward. When we're organising events, we'll be able to be a lot more inclusive, and people are so used to the technology now. So I think that's going to be really beneficial to us.
Sure, yeah, and that makes so much sense as well. And speaking of that, you know, over the last year, I guess a lot of people have been struggling in terms of maybe engagement for colleagues, and from Wellbeing Supports as well. Have you been doing anything interesting from a wellbeing, from an engagement perspective, to support colleagues, and is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, we've done loads. I suppose there's no denying that obviously over the past year we absolutely had to react to COVID. It's interesting because I suppose initially the reaction was to, you know, look at offering extra emotional supports for people. So when we first when everyone started to move to a new way of working and moving home, or you know, obviously the people that were still in the branches were impacted in a different way, we looked at offering extra supports like our employee assistance program, and we extended it to allow the spouses, adult dependent children or dependent parents of colleagues to. We knew it didn't just impact our people, but also the people belonging to them. We offered things like communications around bereavement and grieving and supports in that respect. So that was kind of the initial knee-jerk type of thing. Then I suppose by last summer, the summer 2020, we settled into a bit more of a new normal, and we were doing things like, couch to 5K routes and supports for people with kids, how to entertain them at home when you're working and that type of thing. But then more recently now, I suppose we're looking at, we can't just all be about COVID, and we need to remember that life is still continuing and other things are still happening. So we have done things like we've marked a year of COVID, and we had a mental wellbeing support session to talk about that, just to allow people to take stock of what has happened, but then also to help them kind of, steel themselves for going onward, because I think we had such an initial reaction and everyone thought it would be temporary, but nobody realised that even temporary could still be this long. So we did acknowledge that 1 year of COVID and offer supports to people in that regard, but now we're facing onward and we're looking at more, the broader piece. So for example, this month we're offering mental wellbeing support sessions on healthy relationships. We're doing sessions on first aid for kids, because all this stuff is still happening, regardless of COVID. So I think it's important to keep going in that respect as well, while still not ignoring it.
Very good. Yeah, some interesting initiatives there. I like the first aid for kids.
Yeah,
that's an interesting one. Yeah, and I guess kind of on a related theme, so you're a bank, a large bank. You've kind of got different role types, so office based, who I imagine are almost all remote now. But of course, you've got your front of house as well. The banks are still open, as far as I know, maybe with a smaller staff. Yeah. How do you accommodate, or what have you been doing kind of to support the different role types within the organization?
Yeah, we've really had to make sure that we have to remember everyone, and that everyone is impacted in a different way. So while we have done things to support people who are working from home, we have to really be cognizant of the fact that there's still a huge chunk of our population who are out in the front line working in branches, and they are classified as frontline workers. We've had people in our contact centre who are coming into the contact centre, and other people who have just had to go to office sites just by the very nature of their role. There's people who maybe their domestic setup may not be the most ideal, while we're actively encouraging everyone to stay at home if at all possible. And it is, if you need to work in an office, there has to be a good business reason for it. We've encouraged people to come to us and let us know that maybe their domestic arrangement isn't the best and maybe they need support in that. So we've had to be really, really mindful of all of that. And I think that's where we're really inviting our people managers to step up to the plate in that, and to just be really mindful of the fact that there's different stressors for different individuals. And some people are feeling really, really isolated sitting at home. Some people are going to a branch every day in a shopping centre, feeling really exposed to risk and what risk they're bringing home to their families. So we've really had to keep a very close eye on that to make sure we're balanced in that approach. So it's an interesting one when it's not just 2,500 people sent home to work in their spare room or whatever it might be. We've really had to look after everyone in different ways.
And yeah, again, that you can relate to a lot of that. What's the plan now going forward at PTSB? Any thoughts on, I guess, what the future of work will look like in general, and of course, in particular for yourselves?
Yeah, we're actually adapting our business anyway to reflect various changes. I mean, I'm sure it's everyone knows that there's so much changes happening in banking at the moment, particularly in Ireland. And obviously there's changes happening in the economy. So we're adapting the business to work around how our customers want to deal with us, how our colleagues want to work. So there's lots of changes going on for us at the moment. And that, of course, is going to influence how we're working in the future. We have a new initiative called Ways of Working, which is promoting all the tools that we've made available to people. So, obviously all the various technologies that are available to people, but we're setting in place guidelines around kind of etiquette, around, say, email etiquette, around times of sending emails, meeting etiquette, all that type of stuff. And then, of course, really, really importantly, and again, very topical at the moment, the right to disconnect.
Yeah.
So again, we've been very mindful of the fact that there's no one size fits all approach in that. So we've invited people to set up and agree team charters locally. So each team agrees what works for them. So in my team, we're a small team, we've agreed, what is it that we want to do? What's our boundaries? We have a WhatsApp group. Is it for business purposes only? Can you send a text out of hours in the evening? If it's a jokey one, is that okay? What is it that works for everyone? So everyone agreed and kind of workshopped that. And we're asking all the teams within PTSB to do the same. So it's just making sure that, you know, again, we're factoring in everyone, whether you're in an office or you're working from home, and what it is that you like to have and how you like to work. Again, being mindful of the fact we have people in the group that are maybe parents, and when they were homeschooling, you know, they could have been logging on again at night time, and is it okay to send an email after 9 o'clock, or how that works? So but yeah, I think even in a post-COVID world, it's still going to be some element of office work. I know I personally have actually managed to avail of a new working arrangement. Eventually, post-COVID, the deal will be, well, I'll spend about 50% of my time working from home and working in the office. And I'm really looking forward to that, because it's been so beneficial to me so far, you know. And, you know, people have had the chance now to avail of applying for other things through our enterprise transformation program, like compressed working weeks, reduced working hours, all that type of good stuff. So again, that's something I've availed of. I'm on a parental leave arrangement at the moment, so I'm moving to a 4-day week on a permanent basis, and that's really beneficial to me, because I was so cognizant that parental leave will eventually expire. So it's given me a real good reassurance. So I think it's been really beneficial to a lot of people, just to take a fresh look at how we work and how we can take things forward.
Excellent. Yeah. A lot of food for thought there. I think it's a very kind of mature and inclusive approach that you've detailed there. I like the kind of the team charter approach to a lot of the, let's say, the communications, the email etiquette. Tell me a little bit more about the email etiquette, because I think that's an important one. Like I've come across some organizations that like are investing in sophisticated software that won't allow emails to be sent, you know, after 7 p.m. and before 7 a.m. Whereas I guess if you have something like an agreement, just an understanding on a team to say, look, let's aim not to send emails after 7 p.m. It kind of has the same impact.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And, you know, it's funny because, again, it's different. You know, different people have different opinions on this. It doesn't bother me. I mute all my notifications. If I come in and there's an email sent to me at midnight the previous night, it doesn't bother me. Obviously, I feel sorry for the person that's had to be doing it. But, you know, it doesn't bother me whether it comes through at that time or 7 a.m. or, you know, 2 p.m. in the afternoon. But it does certainly bother others. And again, that's a connection with the right to disconnect. The email etiquette has taken a very, very common sense approach. So rather than putting technology in place, it's putting our trust in people, inviting people to agree locally what works for them, but putting in place kind of common sense guidelines around, you know, don't reply all unless you absolutely have to. Think before you send an email. Is there a better way of getting this communication to someone? You know, would a phone call suffice? And again, that's about strengthening those relationships when we are working remotely as well. So while it is common sense, sometimes you need to actually put these things on paper to actually kind of help people remember them and pay heed to them, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Get it down on paper, you know, workshop it, as you said. And of course, a really important step then is making sure so leadership are involved and they're leading by example as well with that. Because I guess, as you said, like, you're not impacted. You don't, whatever time an email comes in, it doesn't affect you. But it's for others, it might be that 10 p.m. email that comes in that's just weighing on their mind as they're going to sleep, that kind of thing. Like that, so it can affect some people. So just having an understanding in place is so important. Yeah. Any thoughts on the right to disconnect then, which is it's a code of practice, so it's not actually kind of a legal requirement. Is that something that you will, I guess you've already kind of started, I guess, but is that something that you will develop a policy around, or will what you've done already kind of feed into that?
Yeah, obviously with the government announcements and everything coming in, it's something we've started to talk about more. And, you know, we're very cognizant, you know, we're not perfect. Absolutely. You know, these things do happen. You know, people are working long hours. And I suppose, you know, that depends maybe on particular projects. And if that's a short-term thing, you know, for a kind of a long-term gain, and if that's something that they're willing to do, then that's, you know, not a significant problem. But if this is an ongoing thing where this is the norm and they really feel like they never get that right to disconnect and it's really impacting on their well-being, then it's something that we really need to address. So we are taking a very hard look at it. It is, as you say, something we've already started to look at, but I suppose not in the formal right to disconnect piece. It's just been how we work and how do we want to work and what are our ways of working going forward. So it is something that's evolving as we go. We don't have it right yet. And I'd love to meet any company that does get there.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've got a head start on most, I would say. So you're certainly off to a good start there. Yeah, that's something I definitely want to bring up and discuss more at future webinars and get other organizations' opinions on that as well. Tell me a little bit more about, again, I think this is something we're going to see a lot more of, is the kind of reduced hours, as you mentioned, and something you're doing. So you've been doing it for a while already, just the 4-day week. You're now making it, it's a permanent, that was thanks to parental leave. You're now making it a permanent arrangement. I guess, how have you found it, first of all? How have you found it from a work perspective, being productive, being efficient, and then and of course the balance at home, then how is it all working out?
Good. I suppose I'm well used to it now because I've been doing it for so many years. I worked a 4-day week ever since I returned from my first maternity leave. So that was in a previous role. And when I interviewed with Permanent TSB, I didn't mention the request. I was quite sneaky about it, actually. And Fiona, who had hired me, I didn't mention it until I was offered the role. And then I kind of threw it in there just to see what was said. Which that actually in itself sealed the deal for me, because she was so immediately open to the idea. She didn't need to go off and think about it. She just said, yeah, absolutely, no problem. There was no hesitation. And it has been something that has been in place since I started. Obviously, I think it is something that you need to make work for yourself and the business. You know, you need to be kind of a little bit flexible. So if there's something really critical happening at work, I will absolutely log on a Friday if I need to do it. But it has been very rare. And equally, I think it's up to the person to have that responsibility, the personal accountability piece of putting your own boundaries in place. So, you know, I've put those boundaries in place around the expectations. The out of office is on. I don't log on unless I absolutely have to. So there's no kind of sneaky looking at emails unless it's really necessary. And thankfully, my manager, Karen, is hugely respectful of that. And the rest of the team are as well. So yeah, Monday to Thursday, I work hard. This job, Friday, it's a different job.
I think you have young twins as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I do.
I do. You're busier at home than you
so
are.
Monday to Thursday is actually an easier job.
Getting a nice break there, yeah. And so, yeah, very good. So you the parental leave up to now, and you took the Friday off. I actually just interesting. I used to work with a guy quite a few years ago now, and it's the first time I came across the parental leave, and he was doing the very same. He was taking 1 day a week. He chose the Monday actually. And then that was approved. So of course he had the nickname then of Bob Geldof, the fact that he didn't like Mondays. But that's what worked for him. And I actually took it in a different way myself. After our first daughter was born, my partner is from Brazil, so we went to Brazil for 4 months. We used it in one tranche, if you like, the unpaid leave over kind of a Christmas and a New Year. So that was a lovely experience, and something I'd highly recommend. Whatever works for you and your organization, of course.
And I think it's great to see more men availing of it.
Yeah.
It's something we really want to push, because obviously with my diversity and inclusion hat on, it's diversity and inclusion. I suppose people do tend to default to, oh, well, it's all about gender balance and gender pay gap, you know, and it's so much more than that. For us, it's diversity of thought and it's inclusivity of everyone. And yes, we concentrate on gender balance, and yes, we look at inclusion of LGBTQ+, but there's so much more. But I think with the gender balance piece specifically, it's not just about, you know, bringing women up and getting women to the senior leadership level and all about that and about the gender pay gap. That's all really, really important. But you can't do that without encouraging men to do things, avail of parental leave, even paternity leave, you know. So I think it's something that's really, really important to promote, and it's something absolutely we want to do more. And it's great to see even the legislative changes that are coming in under the family bill. There's a lot more happening in that space around adoptive leave for men and that type of thing. So it's great. It's great for men. It's great for same-sex couples as well. So I think there's a lot of good stuff coming our way in that space. Yeah,
really good point, because I think it is something that's almost an unknown for men. It's that they're entitled to it in some circumstances. Yeah, but it's the same. It's unpaid parental leave. I think for children up to the age of 8, if I'm not mistaken, that can be taken. And as I said, you come to an arrangement with your employer as to how you take it.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And can I ask for your own? So you said you're moving now to a permanent. Kind of moving away from the parental leave and to a permanent 4-day week, if you like. There's a company in Ireland who started it, ICE Group, probably about a little over a year ago now, where they actually moved the entire workforce to a 4-day working week. And I think they've added, like, each member of staff is doing, is it an hour extra per day or something like that. So they're maintaining their their 5-day salary, if you like.
Yeah.
Is that something you've worked out with PTSB, or are you actually just working a 4-day week now?
Yeah, so I'm working the 80%. I actually had the option to do either or. So I could have compressed my working hours and done 5 days and 4, or I had the alternative to continue in the same way I was doing, where I was basically working, a reduced hours working week. So that's what I've chosen to do. But again, the option was there for me to do either or. Decided to, just take it that I still wasn't really, when it comes to going back to the office, it would make for a longer day away from the kids. Right. To me personally, that was what worked. But I've known other people and other people who don't have kids who have been successful in applying for that compressed working week, and then they get that day less per week. So it's fantastic. And I think, there's a lot more companies seem to be promoting that. There seems to be a lot more happening, particularly in New Zealand, who, as we recently, are so progressive now. They're in the news quite a lot with everything that's going on. And it's great to see, New Zealand have really embraced that 4-day week. So I think it's definitely going to be something that becomes more popular. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. I personally, of course, I'd love to see it happening, because it means I'll be on a level playing field with everyone else and won't come into a deluge of emails on a Monday morning. But I think it'll take time, but it's certainly something that people could consider anyway in PTSB, which is great.
Yeah, it's great to see. It's, as you said, New Zealand are kind of leading the way in this regard. They're really progressive, and quite a few organizations now have adopted the 4-day week. I think we're going to see a lot more of it. Companies and COVID has actually helped in this regard. Organizations focusing on the productivity as opposed to just, a bum on a seat 5 days a week, which is kind of a hangover from just the Industrial Revolution, like a 9 to 5, clocking in, clocking out. Whereas you could be effectively not really there, or really poorly productive for half that time. It's not about that. It's about the productivity. So interesting to see what kind of progress we can make in this area over the next few years. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the world of work is absolutely changing, and I think, well, if you offer that kind of trust in people, and if you offer them that opportunity, they will absolutely be, as productive, if not more productive, in order to make it work. Because again, you make it work for you, and I think if anyone given the opportunity thought that they could have an extra day on their weekend, they would work. It's about working smarter and not necessarily working harder, but they would work to make it work, if you know what I mean.
Exactly, they really would. If you trust your people, they will pay you back many times over. They really will. Here's on the subject of the future of work. I'm seeing certainly, again, another positive. Well-being in the workplace has been spoken about an awful lot more. Diversity and inclusion certainly is a huge topic, a really important topic. I don't think engagement has ever been more important, especially in a remote working world. I'm seeing quite a few companies now have maybe separate roles for each of these different areas. Is that something, do you think, will your kind of plate become too full soon enough that you'll need kind of separate people to fill these roles?
I at the moment, I don't think so, because what we're really, really pushing is that accountability with leadership piece. And so I think, while yes, they're becoming more popular, things like diversity and inclusion and well-being and culture, that shouldn't necessarily be a HR initiative or something that sits with one team or one person. So if anything, what I'm trying to do, and what we as a HR department are trying to do, is to push that piece back on the business. So for example, particularly now with diversity and inclusion, we had set out with a 2-year strategy in 2018, and we just reflected on all of that at the end of 2020 and where we had come and how we had matured and all the progress that we had made. And we realized that the next step in our journey is about pushing the ownership back to people in the business now and asking them to really step up when it comes to inclusion. Had worked with various teams in the business to make sure that processes were changed. So, for example, that the recruitment process were more inclusive, that our learning and development team were offering training, that our customer complaints team were monitoring any diversity and inclusion related types of complaints. So we worked to get those processes in place, and now we're really asking them to kind of spot things and be really proactive in that space. I think it will be the same when it comes to wellbeing, particularly for us anyway, because we have so many employee resource groups, and they're really, really keen to get involved. People are really enthusiastic about it, which is brilliant. It makes my life so much easier. the fact that people are always more than happy to hear what it is that I have to say and what it is I have to promote, because I suppose they know that it will be of relevance to them and it will be of benefit to them as well. So at the moment, I don't see it as being that my role would be split, more that I would be able to kind of farm that work out to various people in the business, so it becomes an extension of their existing role.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I love that. I absolutely love that. And so D&I, you have a strategy, or you had a strategy, and I imagine you're working on another strategy. Do you have, or are you working on a wellbeing strategy as well?
Yep, we're currently working on that one for 2021 and onward. So it's interesting, when we set out, a couple of years ago, we took really our strategy or our plan based on our feedback from our Every Voice Counts survey, which is an employee engagement survey. So our scores had went up and they had increased, but we knew by the commentary that was in the survey that there was still plenty more we could do. So that's absolutely what we worked on and what we needed to, build out. And we worked with our healthcare providers, so our health screening program provider or employee assistance program provider, to give us anonymized and aggregated data on what it was that our people were saying to them. So what were the issues that were, of importance to them, and so that really helped us plan going forward. The EAP is still readily available, and we're still able to get those anonymized kind of aggregated reports on the topics, very, very high level, anxiety, depression, addiction, what is it that people need support with. Our health screening program, unfortunately, is on pause due to COVID, but hopefully we'll get to start that again. And again, our partner in that space is able to give us some key headlines around, things like BMI levels, stress levels, that type of stuff. So they're able to let us know what are the big headline issues for people, things even as simple as sleep, which is a huge issue at the moment and so topical, and then we can react to that and offer supports and communications and things to help people along. So yeah, lots of good stuff has been done so far, but we have plenty more we can do. I don't think we'll ever stop. I don't think a job will ever be done, to be fair.
True, very true. One of the questions I get asked quite often through the community is, how do you make well-being a strategic priority, or how do you get it on the strategic priority list? And what I encourage people and organizations to do is to, well, first of all, can you align it with the organization's vision and strategy? Quite often the overall organization will have, a 2021 to 2025 strategic roadmap. Can you, by gathering the needs and wants of your colleagues, by getting leadership involvement, by getting your feedback from your Wellbeing Committee and including all of that data, can you develop your high level goals and get them down in a strategic and an operating plan, if you like, and get that included in the organization's strategic plan? Is that what you're doing, or is the strategic, is the wellbeing strategy, the D&I strategy, are they separate, standalone strategy documents?
We actually have, thankfully, this is very much supported by our executive leadership. One of our strategic performance priorities is to create an inclusive high performance culture. So obviously we have that inclusivity piece there, and the high performance, we recognize the fact that with high performance, that comes with colleagues feeling supported in every way, so that with their personal development, their professional development, looking after the physical well-being, their mental well-being, and that inclusivity piece as well. As I said, we've a huge focus on people feeling psychologically safe and feeling, mentally well and strong. And we really want to create more of an openness around our culture as well, so people feel that they can be themselves at work and they can bring their best selves to work. So they all feed into that well-being and D&I piece. So and it's funny, there's so many overlaps with the diversity and inclusion strategy and our well-being strategy, and it's some very, very simple things like our employee resource groups, like say for example our gender better balance. They marked International Men's Day with various supports for men on men's health. Our prison network, who look after LGBTQ+, they looked after mental wellbeing supports for LGBTQ+ colleagues during COVID, when we were at the height of lockdown. Our Life network looks at work-life balance, and they've issued loads of series of communications called Life Through My Eyes, and that factors in things like people living with dyslexia, dementia, experience in fertility treatment, all those things. So they have a nice overlap with wellbeing. So lines are a little bit blurred at times between wellbeing and D&I, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I suppose we're all just really, our ultimate goal is to make it a better place to work, a great place to work for people, we get the best talent, we retain the best talent, and therefore we become a better bank. So it's just common sense, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes so much sense, and you're right. There is an awful lot of overlap there, isn't there? Just you touched on something there, and it's popped up quite a few times again. And we actually had it as a project on the postgrad in workplace wellness at Trinity. It was one of the organizations submitted it as a challenge they were facing, was getting more men involved in their well-being initiatives. There was just a lack of men getting involved in whatever it was that they were running. Is that something you've encountered? And if so, is there anything you've done to maybe encourage more men to get involved?
Yeah, funny. I wouldn't say they've been hesitant about getting involved in our committees or in our groups. So although hands up, I would say that it is more female led, but there are some fantastic male team members. There definitely is a tendency, I think, for females to be more engaged in participating in the events and initiatives. So we haven't proactively kind of set out to get men to attend, but I suppose over the years, I've probably learned to be quite shrewd about how to get men to attend. You know, in a previous life, I remember having, lunchtime information sessions for cancer, and it was a men's cancer session and a women's cancer session. And the women's cancer session was cancer prevention. The women's cancer prevention session was packed room. The men's one was a handful of attendees. So I guess I've learned that not necessarily all men are very comfortable with being seen to go to these events. Yeah. Sometimes you need a gimmick, and we've had events where we've had people like Brent Pope and Alan Quinlan come and speak and talk about mental health and that type of thing. And yeah, absolutely drew male attention, got them into the room. And once you have that captive audience, that's really worked for us. So it is quite sneaky, but and it's a shame that that's what it takes, but it is something that we've learned, that sometimes you need that little bit of a hook. As well as that, I've noticed our health screening program that I mentioned earlier, we actually, when we looked at the figures of attendance and the uptake, I think it was 54% attendance of females. So not massively outweighing the numbers of men who engaged in that one-to-one health screening program. I think it was in line with our actual overall population. It was, it matched up. So I think maybe men might prefer a little bit more of a one-to-one than kind of being seen to go into a room. Now that's a bit of a kind of a broad brush stroke now to all men. And I do think it's changing. I think younger men and women are definitely a lot more proactive about managing their health, physical and mental health, and certainly a lot more than my generation or the generations before me anyway. And I think there's becoming less of a stigma about that and more of a pride looking after your physical and your mental health. So that is changing. But for now, particularly with those generations that are, older, there is probably still a bit of work to be done just to make sure that we're actually capturing their attention. But the same goes, I think, even for people who aren't engaged in looking after their well-being. There was still obviously all those people that went and availed of the likes of our EAP and our health screening program. There's all the people who aren't, and they're the people that maybe need it the most. So that's something that we really need to focus in on, is how do we reach those people?
It's a challenge, isn't it? Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, though. I mean, I've heard Dr. Eddie Murphy speak about this quite often, actually, just in his own experience, either in clinical practice or in the workplace. Just that there's it seems to be quite a reluctance on men to get involved or to speak about their health and well-being as openly as perhaps they should. So any initiatives I hear of that can help or promote or support that, I do like to share that. So, but thank you for sharing that as well.
No problem.
We've focused a lot on actually entirely on the organization, really, which has been really beneficial. And thanks for all that detail. Tell me a little bit about how are you managing to spend, or are you managing to spend time in your own well-being at present? Given the busy home life, the busy work life.
Yeah, I've probably never been the best person at looking after my mental well-being. I suppose for every walk I take, there's a treat at the end of it or something. I think it has actually got better since moving to working from home, both in the physical and the mental well-being sense. Previous to this, when I was commuting into work every day, it wasn't a long commute. I'm coming in from Castleknock. There was always a rush in the mornings, shaking a kid off me and running out the door and racing to catch a train, and, leaving the office, racing to catch a train home and feeling bad about one thing or another, either feeling bad about leaving kids or feeling bad about leaving work behind. But with that, I have a virtual commute in the mornings now, where the kids take me up the stairs every morning on the train, which is always about who's going to be the train driver. I get to, because I live quite close to the Phoenix Park, I get to down tools and go to be at the park gates in minutes, and I can go for a good walk. And, that could be in the morning before I start. It could be over lunch. It could be in the evening if I want to decompress. So I think that's been really, really good. It's been good for my physical health, but also for my mental health, which I think everyone has struggled with, of COVID. I think the ironic bit about COVID is we're all protecting our physical health from this virus, but actually it's taken a massive toll on people's mental health. So yeah, that's been a good thing for me, and that I've been able to do that. And then separately, I suppose I have some really, really great networks in the sense of family and friends. And again, funnily enough, some of my friends' networks, I think we've nearly got closer, even though we haven't seen each other. The relationships have got stronger because there's been more of a rally and to support each other. And again, the WhatsApp groups are lighting up many nights, but it's great to have that, so when I don't see them, I still get that sense of being close to them,
Excellent. And that's a lovely kind of positive note to finish up on. Great to hear all that kind of positivity and getting outdoors and the developing the network, as you mentioned. Like it's so true though, isn't it? Like I think we're feeling, even though we can't be with people, we're actually feeling a little bit more connected, having conversations with people we mightn't have had in person for quite a long time.
That's it. Yeah.
Mary, you've shared so much with us today. Tell me, where can people go to find out more about you, if they'd like to contact you or to find out more about your work?
Typically it tends to be LinkedIn is where I share all the online content about what PTSB are doing, all the great stuff we're doing in wellbeing and inclusivity. So feel free if anyone wants to connect with me there. But equally, I always love meeting new people and hearing from people and sharing ideas mutually. So I am more than happy for anyone to reach out to me, and I'm sure they can get my contact details through you, Brian. So I'd be more than happy to have a chat with anyone about our work and hear what they've got going on. Absolutely,
and we'll include your LinkedIn details on the article that goes out with the podcast.
Brilliant.
Mary, thanks so much for your time. Stay safe, and we'll chat with you again soon.
That's brilliant, Brian. Thanks very much. Take care.
Hello, everyone. Brian here again. A big thank you for listening right to the end of this episode of the Work Well podcast. I want to give a big shout out to our partners, the Fruit People, who are leading the way in workplace nutrition, both in office and remotely. You can check them out at thefruitpeople.ie. And it's with thanks to the Fruit People that we have a delicious fresh fruit and healthy snack pack to give away to one lucky listener for each episode of season 3. To find out how to enter, go to workwellpodcast.com and find the link to the latest podcast episode. Finally, are you interested in diving deeper in the area of workplace well-being? Why wouldn't you? You need to check out the Work Well Institute. The Work Well Institute is an online hub for all your workplace well-being, education, and training needs, whether you're an individual or an organization. Head on over to workwellinstitute.org, where you'll find out the details on all the courses available, including my flagship program, Developing a Workplace Wellness Program That Lasts. Check it out at workwellinstitute.org. Thanks again for listening. The original music for this podcast was composed by my friend Greg Clifford. Thank you, Greg. Remember to work well, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Work Well podcast.